Welcome to stage 4 cutting. I will be showing you how to cut your lino cut and be giving you some tips and techniques on how to get different effects with your tools. So I've got my design on the lino and the black is what remains, and I will be showing you how to cut this. But before we begin that, I just want to say a few things about lino. It can be quite temperamental to temperatures. So if, for example, if it's a cold day, you'll find that your lino is more difficult to cut. On a hot day, your lino might actually be quite soft, and that affects the pressure that you will use on your tools. If it's really cold, you can actually heat it up by putting a baking sheet on it and just putting an iron on it briefly, or you can get a hairdryer to warm it up. You can even actually just put it on your chair and sit on it for a little while, and that will warm it up. So just be aware that on a cold day, your lino might be more difficult to cut than on a warm day. And if it's an extremely warm day, your lino might actually almost be oily when you're cutting it, and your blade will slip through it really easily. So I then want to talk about these tools. There are different tools. There are V-shaped ones and U-shaped ones. They all do different things, which I will show you. But initially I use the fine V-shaped tool to outline my design, and I do that with the fine tool because it gives me a nice line around my design, and then I can cut away the excess material. So in effect, all the grey here will be removed. The other thing about lino cutting tools, particularly these file ones, they're extremely sharp, so always cut away from yourself, never cut towards yourself, and always put your anchoring hand behind the blade. If you put it in front, it slips through really easily and you will make a really deep hole because these are sharp, because also you're putting quite a lot of pressure to create the line. The other thing you will note is that I've got an angle of about 20 degrees of my blade. It will differ with different people. It depends on how the knob sits in your hand and also what you're comfortable with. And this is something that I can't be totally prescriptive with because it will differ depending on the pressure you apply. And you can see I'm pushing that, but I'm not pushing too hard, because if I push hard, the blade will slip in under the lino and you get breakage of the edge. I've just gone over there a bit so that I'm not ruining my line here, but you can push the blade too deep and too hard and you'll get breakage. So the important thing is to get good pressure. So I would suggest that you do a practice block with something reasonably simple, because it does take a little bit of experience to get the right feel. And sometimes you will go offline, but that's why I've got the black here. I can come back to it. So I outline my whole shape in this way. Okay, so you will see that I'm actually rotating my lino as I'm going, and that's always to keep my hand behind. When you've got one of those anchoring tablets, which you can buy, your lino sits there and you can't move it around, which makes it really difficult to keep your hand behind your blade all the time. So I actually use the fact that I can move the lino as something to help me keep my hand behind my tool. So I've moved around the outside of my shape, and you can see here I've actually gone into the black a little bit, and I would redraw the black with my Sharpie because I want the black to stay. It's no big drama. I've just cut off a little point. It doesn't really matter there, but I was actually pushing too hard then, and that's why it did that. So when you get to corners like this, I tend to go one direction, and to get the corner quite sharp, I go the other direction. This is quite a sharp corner. This one is a more shallow corner, so I would do that slightly differently. I would go one way, and again I'm moving my lino, and then I would come in on this side. So I'll just do this bottom section of the leaf. So I've cut my lines. This is my black line. I check it out and see how thick it is. And I use a U-shaped tool to take away the background. You can see, because I've got that line there, it won't break my black line. So you would take away all the grey in that way, and you might use a bigger U-shaped tool or this one. Smaller spaces, I use the smaller U. Bigger spaces, you use the bigger U. The other thing that you need to be careful of when you're making lino cuts for fabric is that you take away quite a lot of the background. Because fabric is soft, it actually kind of sucks into the cut design. And you'll see in the printing process, I'll discuss it there as to how that happens, and it's just because you're dealing with fabric, and fabric has different qualities to paper. The other thing I want to show you is some of the things that you can do with tools in terms of creating texture, and I'll just do this on this piece. For example, if you want to do little flicks to create little U shapes like this, you push in and flick out. You push in and flick out. And when you use different size ones, so I'm using a wider, you get wider shapes. So you're using the shape of the tool to create texture. I also use the U-shaped tools to create circles. So you put pressure on the left side of your blade, which is probably the right side of the blade if you're left-handed, and I move my lino around. This is the way I get the best circles. It's a bit of a process to move that lino around, but you do actually get much better circles doing it this way than any other way. The other thing is you can use your V shape to create squiggle lines. You just move the blade from side to side. You can create little flick lines which are shallower at one end compared to the other end. And with the narrow one, you can create almost like little strokes that look like stitches in a way. So your blades can be used in all sorts of ways to create strokes. And to take away backgrounds, you will find when you do this, there's a line there. I'm not sure that that's completely visible, but there is a line there. You need to take that away because it will actually print on the fabric. Now that may be an effect you might like. For example, if you were doing water things, that line could be suggestive of wave lines, but in some instances you wouldn't want it there. So you need to make sure you double back over and take it away so you have no lines that will print, because the ink will well in there. So I want to show you a piece of pre-cut to show you what the different strokes do. And this is a sample piece. I've actually used it to print backgrounds, but all of these are different effects that you can get with your blades. So you can see I've done circles here, I've done flicks, I've done longer lines, shorter lines, and these are all done, these for example are done with my U-shaped tools, these ones as well. These little flicks have been done with my V-shaped tool. These lines have been done with a wider V-shaped tool. These ones with the more narrow one. I've used my V-shape to create these quite long flicks, and these kind of in-between lines will print and create an interesting effect. The other thing is you can create really interesting effects with just the lines and taking away background or taking away the lines. So this is actually like a positive or negative version of this one. So the lines here are the positives and here they're the negative. So it's a good thing to practice and maybe even make a piece of lino like this, because these are really effective for printing in a light colour as a background. And the other thing is it's good practice for all the strokes that you will be doing, because it will teach you the kind of pressure that you need to create these kind of strokes and cuts. So I had the leaf shape before. I've got a slightly different leaf shape here, but it's the same principle. I'll just take away this background so you're not distracted. You can see here I've done the positive cutout and my vein lines have been cut away. On this one I've left the vein lines in here, but I've left the background. So when you're printing this, this would print as a colour and the vein lines would print as a colour. In this particular one, it's the actual background of the leaf that will print and all of the background will not print. So it was a similar principle with the leaf that I showed you. This is just a slightly more complex leaf, but I wanted to show you the difference between the positive and the negative. And now that we've got this prepared, I will see you in the next stage, which is stage 5, printing.